Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are spectating Diamond plus Lobbies, and we ended up watching mostly pro players, master players, and of course Predator rank players. What you will see is how you improve how nuance and even small mistakes make a major impact. And of course there's multiple routes to success. Sometimes making a mistake can turn into opportunities if played together. Remember, teamwork is key in how your utility is used on the upper echelon. At this point it's assumed you can aim. So let's watch and enjoy the rest of the video spectating. Alright, as we begin, let's take a look at the rank distribution down below. We have one Pred player, mostly Masters at 5 there. I mean, I guess it's mostly Diamond at the end of the day, but this distribution is pretty wide, so that's pretty interesting. What I want to discuss as well is just the reason why you see such a wide distribution when you're a Diamond Plus is because there's just not enough people in Diamond, so therefore they kind of drop into either Plat, or you'll see more Masters and Pred players to fill out the lobby, especially if they're waiting an extended period of time. So even if you look at the distribution now, you'll see just how low that percentage is overall. I find that really fascinating. So now what we're going to do, let's go and skip ahead, and let's take a look at the gameplay of, well, we end up spectating a Master Squad right off the rip, and what they end up doing, and let's talk about the thought process best we can, and break down as many tips as humanly possible. Now, one thing that Master players, or even any pro player is really good at doing is making sure they pretty much pick a POI clean, and you'll notice also their loadouts and what they choose, and they're looking for specific things at all times. They're not really dilly-dallying and just window shopping, they're looking for something specific so they can win the round. We're going to see a consistency, and we're going to pause once we start reviewing their loadouts and give some tips on why they pick them. Right now, the meta is a little bit more clear, partly because everyone's running shotgun, and we're going to talk about why, and you'll see it later in the footage when you see a lot of these pro players play. I mean, because we actually did spectate Waltzy, so you'll get to see why they're choosing the loadouts and engagements in the way they are. So here in a minute, we'll switch through. Let's take a look at the first one here. So we have a few of them. Let's go and pause and take a look at their loadout at the bottom, right here. They're running always a Mastiff, pretty much. There's always a Mastiff or an Eva. Every one of these, you're going to see them switch here soon, is going to be running some sort of shotgun. And the reason for that is because you're going to need high burst damage, especially when you're trying to get eliminations and whenever you're fighting in a bubble. So Gibraltar bubble, halos from Lifeline, or even just trying to work your way through a Newcastle tactical. Those legends have really shaped the meta currently, and you're going to see them quite a bit. And what you will find is even in this comp, most individuals are actually not running a recon or support, meaning they have no idea where to rotate and where to go. They're just playing guesses because they actually don't know. And you actually find that this team doesn't even fight anybody. In fact, they end up rotating far this way, and you'll see that as they keep moving through. So let's go to keep watching how they handle their rotation. So now we see this loadout here, a Scout and Mastiff. We got your mid-range and you have your close range. And then you see Flatline Eva and L-Star and Mastiff. So we are seeing a distribution of mid to long range, but also something for close range. Handling those both extremes, so whenever there is a bubble fight and there are people fighting, then they are able to bubble dance near those encounters. That is the goal. And to have burst damage, because that reset can be pretty monumental and pretty massive. Now, you might be asking the question as well, could I run, let's say, a car SMG or a Volt or an alternator? The answer is potentially, but it depends on how you manage to take that fight. But I promise you, pretty much anybody running a Mastiff versus, let's say, a Volt trying to bubble dance is most likely going to lose. So they do go a little further into zone like we had discussed, and we're going to see how that plays out. One thing that the teams are also really good at doing is making sure that they hit every bit of utility that they can. Now, unfortunately, like we mentioned, they're not going to be hitting any recon or console, but also the utility as they're flying across, they're going to end up hitting this right here. They're going to hit, they've been, you know, they'll hit the juicer. You know, they call it different things. I've heard of people call it juicer, harvester, bathwater. There's a lot of different terminology. Comment down below what you call it. Believe it or not, everyone calls it something a little interesting, right? But in terms of looking for your loadout, this is where you see just it's highly efficient for the most part for playing ranked. Now in pro play, you'll see it be even faster, which is why teams are ending up on top of you and why they're pretty much set to go for any sort of fight. Now this is pretty much what they're doing. The zone is closing. Now the reason why the squad is definitely pushing is that they are masters and they haven't gotten into any encounter. They do know earlier when they hit the... Let's go back and take a look at that map, shall we? Actually, let's take a quick look. Now, when we take a look at the map, we knew where teams were landing. We knew that they were here, 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 And we know that nobody was necessarily fighting, which is why they didn't go outside a zone and fight, because nobody was engaging anywhere. So that's why the team decided to go this way, and they're looking for an encounter, which is strong because remember, they aren't Masters players, so they're gonna need to get as many points as humanly possible, because if they don't fight early, look how many teams are already pretty much eliminated here. We already have half the lobby. This is normal pretty much in Diamond Plus, is that if you're not fighting off the rip and you didn't find where that massive fight was located, then you're going to end up with low KP, which is why individuals tend to third and look for something, because at end game in terms of points, if you end up with even 3, you know, eliminations and you're at the end game, you're still barely going up. You need at least 2 strong encounters in Diamond Plus just to gain some sort of value. Otherwise, that value just isn't there. Now, sometimes this can lead to mistakes, and you're going to see a lot of it coming up here. Now, remember, a loot pattern should be as efficient as possible, but don't obsess too much about it. You know, play the loot that you're getting, and let's break down this fight as well. Because, I mean, at this point, everyone has a strong loadout. Every single one of them came out of that POI and went to the next one with a really strong loadout. There's absolutely pretty much no excuse in regards to not having what you need. Most teams, whenever I spectate in the lower ranks, when you know, like gold and below, and then there's plat and kind of in the middle, where they usually leave a POI and it's just not as strong, right? But Diamond Plus, trust me, they're going in very confident with exactly what they need. There is no window shopping. They know what they're doing. Now, when it comes to this encounter, the interesting part is they see that there's a fight here. Now, this would be my recommendation. Now, because if you go straight forward, the downside of going to this encounter is you don't know what is on the left side or the right side. Now, keep in mind, it is rank, so at the end of the day, you can definitely bully your way out, and we're looking at a Master Squad that they definitely know this. So it's one tactic, but I always recommend kind of going from the outskirts when pushing in to find that, and you're going to see kind of this mistake. But it means that they have recovery. That's why they're playing with no fear, because technically they could have rolled up as well and not ran into any problems, but you'll see here. Now they know they're distracted, so they're moving forward. Here's shots on the right, so it makes sense that there would most likely not be somebody on the left. That would be the most logical thing, which I would agree with. Now, unfortunately, again, that counter from that Sentinel was just massive, and then the team did end up rolling up. One thing you have to question is how long these fights are taking, right? Because there's a few things that happen. That burst damage, this is why burst damage is so important. So let's take a look back again. Right here, because there is a team rolling up, because it did get quiet. So when it gets quiet, you have to essentially make firm decisions, right? You have to make a decision. Am I going to go in on that, or am I going to get out? What do I see? This person made a very fast decision. So, you know what? I'm going to rotate out. And unfortunately, the lifeline just got one-tapped completely. And that's where burst damage is seasoned when it comes to Sentinel. Longbows are strong. Mastiff is strong. They make these opportunities possible, where it's pretty much like using, you know, I mean, they got focus fire. Waltzy just pretty much shredded as well there. But that Sentinel plus that focus fire, working as a team, was monumental. Now, that doesn't mean it's over. I think teams need to realize when they're backing out that it's not over till it's over, because they did have information that there was another team here, right? We do know that there was another team blasting away at them, so there is a possibility that they're going to fight and that there's an opportunity to go back in. Which I think that's what they're trying to hear out, and they're looking at the kill feed, which is important. Most individuals at a lower tier are not watching the kill feed, but this tells you who you're facing up against, and also, well, if there's knocks, and they're kind of waiting to see what's going on. That means that, look at that, that's already gone, it's eliminated. And the champion was also a Master Squad. Now for the portal play, they go in. It's also better if the Newcastle does grab it, because they're able to get a recon extra out of it. You know, the respawn beacon. Couldn't find the words there for a second. But they're able to get that and able to res. Now this is an aggressive res, but they're definitely trying to bait them out to make a mistake, which is looks like that's kind of the goal here, to get them to push over. They do need a fight. Remember I had said they can't necessarily just keep running for the rest of the lobby and go to endgame, because they need to make something happen, or else look at this discrepancy there, minus 85. They need to make something happen. And of course, if the team is running out in the open, which is what happens on Stormpoint specifically, is that if a team's running out in the open, well, I mean, you do have an opportunity to make something happen. So now the team is completely regrouped. You know that your lifeline definitely doesn't have as many resources because he just res, but that's okay. You can still make something happen if you play as a unit, and you're going to see where that happens. Massive point right here. Okay, ready? I know this is going to be nitpicking, but they did move very, very quickly. They made a choice right here. Now, they would have to shove as fast as humanly possible because they almost managed to turn this fight around right here. It almost happened. Very, very close. They would have to say we have to turn and burn right here as a group, and one person to be a little closer for this to essentially work out. I think what ended up happening is that they pulled back just a little too far, and even though it was like a second, let's take a look how fast. You'll see how technically their entry right here is the one that needed to be forward, but is slightly hesitating. It's very nuanced. It's very nitpicky, but if they did just go immediately as a group right here and eliminate them, there is that possibility because they could have, you know, they won't have Halo, but they could at least thrown their Newcastle tactical and try to clean it up. Or the other decision, remember the other decision is go as a team, all three people, right? And then just leave and then get out of this encounter. But again, the downside is that when you're playing at an upper rank is you're not gaining many points, essentially. And then you need to kind of think of your next draw for the next game and say, well, we need to fight a little more aggressively. But of course, when you do that, you may not get the loadout that you need. There's pros and cons, right? I think as you start to notice Diamond Plus is that it's very nuanced to say, well, there's two different ways to handle this, and you don't necessarily know what is going to happen. But as long, my biggest tip for anybody watching, do things as a team. You have to play as a team, and you have to be very quick to go in and out, or else you're going to see mistakes. You're going to see a lot of positive, quick decision-making here that we're also going to praise as well. This fight is fantastic to break down. Now, the other team knew to stall by throwing grenades, and there's also the downside. Let's say if they did go forward on this, then they would have had grenades on them. It's possible they might have been able to eliminate this person, but the other team is also very smart in using utility to buy their teammate here some time that is behind that wall, because if all three of them came around the corner, then yeah, they probably would have gotten stuck. And this fight did have multiple moments where it could have been better. I think the biggest mistake you're going to see is that later they do get isolated out, and that becomes their biggest detriment. So they're using grenades back. What's really great about this, let's take a look at this. Ready? The Newcastle was very fast in reacting by, again, throwing a grenade to stall them in case they were going to try to push forward. But also the tactical. What's really great is you're going to see the tactical pull back along with the res to help the team get the reset. It's very important as they pull back that the Wraith is here to try to capitalize on a mistake as Waltzy's team and Zap come in. I want to say, and I don't know for sure if they're playing with if they're duo queuing with a third, because the third is platinum. We do know that later. So let's take a look at this. It's a great play as they're moving forward. Now, what's interesting is they also use utility to protect themselves. Everyone thinks that support are not aggressive, and this is a common mistake that I see players make, is that they're not using utility forward. You're going to see Zap do this a little later, and it's fantastic, but also the bubble forward to create space so they can start maintaining pressure. Even though this is here, they are protected as they move forward towards their opponent. So don't count your legend out thinking that it's not an aggressive legend. When you see bubbles go forward, you see Newcastle walls go forward, and even halos can be dropped forward to create space to give your team a moment to do essentially this. If they're all three in the bubble, as we draw that there, and they all push forward and isolate somebody out, and one person's caught out not looking or paying attention, then it's kind of funny, their name is center of attention, interesting, then that's where you can capitalize on the mistake. And you're going to see that here. Ready? They're pulling it back. They have drone. They technically have a solid reset here on this fight. They have the grenade here. Now, I say this was the biggest mistake is if they stayed a little closer together. One went over here. One is in the center, and one, they're all three different lanes, but of course, Zap and Waltzy and their random are better at trying to push forward as a unit and also winning their ones. It gets pretty close, but see how they're essentially going right and they're leaving the left side? He uses the Ash uses the port to catch up here. They do catch him out. That timing is also very, very close that they could have done something, but they are a lot closer here. Now, you would think that it should be over, but of course, it ends up in a 1v1, and that's where, again, when we look at this, we see just how much a Mastiff can really make a big difference here. Let's kind of break this down a little bit frame by frame as we take a look here. Remember, the lifeline is up. They kind of spread out just a little bit, right? All three of them are going to mostly go towards this side, right? While they're mostly on the left side, and that's kind of where the lifeline gets caught out. If they kind of played even together, just on this side, the lifeline didn't have to be alone. And I think that's where the Wraith, of course, they took some damage here, which makes it a little difficult in terms of buying some time. It's why they're pushing. It's why I call out that I think the Ashe is by themselves, because they do get split as well on the other team. And this is where they do succeed, because technically 2 out of the 3 are closer together over here, right? Remember, we got 2 here, and then we have the lifeline by themselves. But if the lifeline might have just played over here with them, or vice versa, that's what I'm trying to say. If they kind of made a choice, I think that probably would have saved them a little bit of time, because the enemy team also made a blatant mistake by their Ashe just going this way by themselves. So essentially they had almost a 3v2 on Zap and Waltzy. That's why I say every second kind of matters here. And it just goes back to the theme of just picking a lane together and trying to isolate somebody out. And sometimes those windows are only open for a short minute. And if you're not playing together, then sometimes the tables can turn very quickly, where even a small mistake of climbing right there that you saw can be make and break, and then there you go. It's a very tough fight. It's a very tough fight that could have gone either way when you look at their HP and you see how close it was, because this fight still was really close overall. I mean, Waltzy is literally pretty much 1 HP, and then Zap did go down, so it was a very, very close fight where, just to recap, at the start here, when they're over here on the mini-map, they could have pushed out or they could have retreated. That was option 1. Now, when they res, if they played together on the far left altogether or far right, that could have turned the tide, because the Ashe with Zap and Waltzy ended up making I would say a mistake, but going far this side by themselves. And then because they were kind of going one at a time and the wall kind of made a mistake climbing up, it gave the game pretty much to them. And it really could have gone either way. And I'm just guessing that this person is not a part because they are plat. So it's definitely possible the team could have won. It's definitely possible that Waltzy and Zap could have cleaned it up a bit more. I hope that's clear. I feel like I had to repeat that several times because it's just small moments. Small moments. Even as I'm doing it and you rewatch it, let's rewatch it from just the beginning. I think it's just really important just to get this point. And I'll just commentate over it just to make sure we get it. All right, you'll see it all in real time, okay? I hope for many different learners here, there's going to be some people that benefit better from the fact that we're pausing, and the ones that will watch in real time, or the ones that just break it down with a summary. So I hope, based on all those variants, that you're able to get something out of this. That's my goal. So ready? So right now, there's 2 on the left, and the lifeline has an opening. If they were a little closer, they have to make the decision either go in or go out. It's kind of half, even though it doesn't seem like it, and they played aggressively, they pulled back a little too far. Now, they use grenades to stall the fight, and they go for res, and the Newcastle plays here. The lifeline, unfortunately, they're going to bubble forward. Lifeline's going to go right. The Ashe is going to port left. There's 2 on the left, which is why the Ashe loses, and unfortunately, the lifeline doesn't win their 1. You'll see that. And the lifeline could have won their 1, and this could have instantly been traded. So they're isolating out Waltzy and Zap over on the right side, essentially. The Ashe goes all the way over there on their own and gets eliminated. And then we see them 2v1 here as best they can. And then the wall, which is supposed to buy themselves some time, ends up becoming detrimental instead, because they don't know where the other opponent is, because they weren't keeping tabs. And that all happened. You see how fast that happens? That happens in a matter of just 1 second, 1 second, 2 seconds, 1 second. And Waltzy over here just flexing pretty much at this point. Even though they do get run up on. And you'll see the fast reaction time. Ready? Let's take a look at this. Which is fascinating. Just a confidence in using utility is so important in resetting. Technically, they should have reset even faster here, just to make sure they didn't get 30, because if they did get 30 here, then that was going to get them eliminated. But it is ranked, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day. There they are. Look at that. Fast reaction. That was really, really fast. Let's take a look at that again. Without hesitation, I think they probably, Waltzy probably had a split second here. Ready? As they come down, I see somebody. That's how fast. Ready? From this frame, and then probably about like 20 frames later, they you know, Waltzy was like, I see him. Boom. Instant cover for the teammate without hesitation. If Waltzy had hesitated even for 1 second, this Ash was gone. Ash was gone, ladies and gentlemen. That would have been it right there. Now, because of that, Waltzy does have wall and places it down to create cover. This pretty much creates the cover that they need. And what this does and why Newcastle is so strong, and I tell everyone to make sure that at least half your body is covered whenever you're fighting, because it's going to give you a strategic advantage. And you see how their body is at full? It's why Newcastle is so strong. Even if they were to blast, remember this is giving energized shields to them as well. And you're going to see the HP fill, which I thought you had to be just behind the wall, but the fact that it just stays with them, it's literally like a Watson generator. Newcastle is so strong in the right hands. Like, seeing it on Waltzy is absolutely terrifying. And there you go. Look at the HP. Ready? It's crawling up. Look at that. That's insane. And the burst damage here. Now, it happens that you're going to whiff, especially with a Mastiff. But these shots, especially from Gibraltar and the instant reload, are absolutely terrifying. Insane. They go for the revive, and it's a nice fast reset. Even if they were to get thirded here, they would be just fine in this encounter. Insane. Insane play. From putting the wall down, to capitalizing on the damage, to moving forward. Just absolutely insane. And maybe Gramps is part of their squad. I just don't. It was hard to tell. I didn't go look at their stream or anything like that. I'm just going based off of what I can see. Now, this is interesting. They dropped this, and I don't know if that's bait to see if anybody will come through. Because you're going to see they kind of just chill here for a minute. And I think they're trying to see if anybody's in this area to make it seem like, oh, wait, somebody is going to revive over here. And I think they're using it as bait. I want to say that's what it is. Or they're chilling and they're tabbed out and talking with their chats. Those are the only things I can speculate are actually occurring here. But I mean, based on they got KP, they're positive, they have purple, they're on their way to red, they're pretty much chilling. At this point, when you have momentum, it's so important to talk about this as well. I was talking with fellow colleagues last night about this. Momentum, I would say, is more or less round based, to where you get some kills and then you're doing well. That's pretty much it. Everyone is momentum based. Nobody is specifically a momentum based player. You can get warm and you can get hot, but you need to play well with your fundamentals. I would say replace the word you're a momentum based player and you get hot with you just need a solid fight, and you need to make sure that you win that fight so you can snowball within that specific round. Because you can start over in the next round and make common mistakes, and that's where you're at. So let's take a look at the zone, which is really important as well in terms of decision making. This is going to pull towards this side of the map, and I do know that. And what you're going to see is that Waltzy's team actually is going for a little bit more KP, and it becomes their ultimate downfall. So let's take a look. I think they actually get routed. I think they actually fight another team here beforehand. So we'll break down that fight as well. Yeah, they do. They get caught out. Good tactical. Great reposition. This is a great way to think of your Pathfinder grapple, advantage, your Q out, all of those things. And remember, the fight's not over till it's over. Dragging right behind the Newcastle wall. They have cover here. And the team has to push forward. And it honestly, you can see here that they tried their best to make a play. But also they kind of hesitate here, where the fight no longer is in their favor with the Mastiff. They really spin it here, and then you saw the Newcastle do well by using the tactical to move forward, but the fight stalls and they realize they're out of their element. But they almost got it. They almost needed to move a little forward faster. And I can't see the enemy team's POV, but I can tell, based on the fact that they weren't right on top of that res right away, that there was a hesitation, and this is where hesitation happens. Hesitating, even saying the comms of, oh my gosh, I knocked him, should we push? Is already enough to delay. And it's hard because Newcastle got away, right? They did a lot of damage on that. And Newcastle is going to be pretty much set. And they have a Pathfinder, so technically, if they were to push this, here's two options. Either they get the knock and they say, you know what, zone is closing. They were reds. I mean, they got the crack and they got the knock, so realistically, anybody would want to push. With 8 squads remaining, that would be ideal, right? But if you crack a Pathfinder, then they are not able to go in, per se, because they're cracked. So I see where the mobility got stalled. Now, for this to really work is that Pathfinder would need to grapple in immediately, or somebody with mobility, either the other Newcastle too. Notice how the other Newcastle is going to use their tactical here, but they could have walled forward on top. Here's an example of team synergy. The Pathfinder grapples in, the Newcastle, wherever they're at, Newcastle walls on top of them, and then they get to fight here, and then there's wall versus wall. And it would have pretty much made it a lot smoother compared to what we see. But because there's a slight delay, we're kind of stuck in the scenario here where they see it in the bubble and they're pretty much reset. Newcastle sees here and sees, okay, well, they're fully healed. And then the isolation happens of the opponent. They're able to isolate somebody out. They see the damage difference, and they know they're going to win in this point pretty much. Like, it's pretty much over. And now another one's even more isolated. They did manage to get what they needed. They pushed forward a little bit. You see how I know they have their wall? You see how they have their wall? Imagine if they were to put that synergy, and it's a matter of seconds, though. They have to make the decision fast, especially against a team like Waltzy and Zap that are going to put wall and put bubble down within a few seconds to be able to counter them. And it's scary because you're like, well, that's so difficult. What if we go forward and they wipe us? You're never going to get a better opportunity than a knock, pretty much. If you can't get it on a knock, then unfortunately, I just don't think that you're ever going to win the fight unless you can isolate them out. If they're all three in a bubble, remember when we talk about those bubbles, right? If they're all three in those bubbles, then what are you going to do? You have to counter that somehow, right? And you have to either beat them before they do set up or back out and bait them out in the open, one of the two. But you have to make firm decisions. Check your utility. I don't think I saw a grenade thrown out over there. You know, I didn't, again, utility is so important. What can you do to close the gap or buy yourself time or to help you move forward or essentially just get away? Like I said, if that team had ran, I wouldn't have blamed them either. If they pushed in and fought, I wouldn't have blamed them either. But even though it was like 2 seconds in a higher tier lobby, it's going to look like a mistake. That's the fascinating part when you're playing at these levels, and why a 3-stack versus a solo queue person is going to struggle. If you're watching this and you solo queue a lot, those seconds, I mean, it's hard when you're playing with randoms, and what makes a big difference. Let's take a look at this here. This is very interesting, actually. I remember as I was recording this, I was like, where are they going? What's going on here? And this is going to be their downfall, like I had mentioned, is that they end up wanting to fight here for even more KP, but what ends up happening is they do get wrapped on, and they get gated. Now, even if they were to win this, going here would not be ideal because it most likely would be gated, and they would have to pretty much bully their way out with massive amounts of damage and clean it up efficiently, which you're going to see that they're pretty efficient, but realistically, they should have just held up here, and they got a little too excited. And they would probably comment, it's ranked, well, I just want to fight. That's fine, too. They made a decision, and the decision, you'll see, they were not hesitating at all. Look at Zap. Fantastic bubble forward. No hesitation here. They made a firm decision, and it just unfortunately didn't pan out to cleaning it up fast enough. And also, kudos to Zap as well here. He doesn't wait to chase because he knows there's a few things here. He doesn't chase because he knows zone, and he knows they're going to go out, but he knows he has to go back in case there is a gate that's going to happen, which inevitably does. And they honestly could have been just fine here. It was just a little wishy-washy. It's just unfortunate, right? They weren't expecting to get blasted there. They had already popped bubble in their utility. And they do try to go for the res. Because there's so many teams, it doesn't pan out. And Waltzy has fantastic shots here. But unfortunately, it's just not enough. Later, what you're going to see Waltzy try to do here is I think he's looking for heat shields to kind of buy himself time. And as again, Zap and Waltzy, they were extremely efficient on this push. Very, very efficient. The only thing, it's hard to say hindsight 2020 all the time and look at this and say, well, we didn't know we were going to get wrapped on, or they didn't see it as they flew in. And that's just kind of what happens in a battle royale. What they do extremely well as pro players is that they are very firm in their decision making. And for better or for worse, they stick with it. Like Waltzy could have popped a syringe here, maybe would have lived, and it's a big maybe. But unfortunately got eliminated, and they still went up. But of course, if there is the other option that I'm sure they were thinking, if they just kind of held and waited, then they probably would have gone up more. Because then you'll see, again, this is another tip for people that are trying to rank up, is that you will see a lot of people who are trying to fight, such as Masters or Preds, because they do need more KP for the round to be more impactful, is that what you're going to see is that if you actually just go to zone, you're going to benefit a lot more. If you look in zone, there's pretty much only one team there, and everyone else is pretty much playing on the edge, rotating late. So if you do play zone, you're pretty much going to play it alone, but make sure that you get a few eliminations before you go, so therefore you'll come out ahead. Probably the best advice that I can give. Because pretty much what you're going to see the remainder of the round is just mostly Diamond players, and there's literally only like one team actually in zone doing anything at all right now. There's a team right here, they're here, you know, there's another team here, and I think there's one here. There might be one unaccounted for. I think it might be a rat. We'll kind of take a look. No, they're fighting over on the far left. If you hear a cat in the background, I apologize. It's completely normal. We got cats in the household. Little one, I know we mentioned last spectating creature. Your sweetheart. This isn't a bad scale up. He cancels the heal. Only reason he cancels the heal is to do a little bit more damage there. If they pop the heal, I don't think they get that crack. So it's respectable. Let's try to take a look to see what we could have done differently here. This is a tricky, this might be a little bit of a tricky fight because they do clean it up, but they lost their teammate, meaning that it wasn't a clean fight. So let's try to see what they could have done to make it a little cleaner. It's most likely the response is that they should have just played together. Maybe, you know, Pathfinder goes to height just to scout out, but they do need to go. They got 10 seconds. So they catch one out. So this is comms, and that the Newcastle could either tactical forward to protect the teammate, but they have a one-on-one here. Pretty much. Like, they're just pretty much caught out. Let's take a look. Okay, so everyone's healthy at the moment. There's nothing wrong that's happened. I do think that Newcastle needs to use a tactical. I think they're probably afraid to use it because the downside is that they're probably going to need it later, probably right here. And if they don't have it, that's probably going to be a little scary. Now, the Pathfinder does have to bat. And, oh, they get greedy. That's what happened here. The Newcastle, for some reason, I think is going for the finish. And then they see this, but they're getting caught out. Realistically, instead of going for the finish... And this is the hard part where it is important to go for finishes on opponents because you don't know if they're going to run over and res. And in this scenario, because they're all together, they have this wall right here, essentially blocking out the two opponents. They should have just kept shoving forward rather than going for the knock. And if they are, then hopefully they get the armor swap, but then that causes the mistake that you're going to see here. And it looks like they weren't, that's like the lifeline was above there, but I think in this scenario, going for that knock is what actually costed them this encounter. Yeah, this is pretty much what costed them this fight. I mean, they win it, but they lost their teammate, and I think they get him back, but this is a lot of wasted time, right? They go for the res. I don't think they're able to get the banner, unfortunately. Yep, it's pretty much a done deal there. And all they can do is move forward. The mistake is very small. You see how small these mistakes are? All we saw there was just simply, you didn't need to go for the knock. You need to keep pushing forward. Zone is going in the back. Technically, zone would have put enough pressure. There's no way they're going to res that. And it does happen because there's a fear of individuals resetting. And they probably would have gotten gated here. They would have been down here as a group a lot quicker. And yeah, that costed them. So now we only have 3 teams remaining, and we probably won't do as many free frames here at the end, but I do ask, if you watch until this point, please leave a like, show your support on the channel. Every little bit helps. So you have no idea that just leaving one like helps support the channel so much. Helps the video get more discovered. If you're watching this point, you know, bring it up again later, leave it up in the background. It helps so much by supporting the channel. Now, we do, remember how I said there was like one team in zone? There literally is one team in zone right over there. We do have, I believe, ends up being a duo over here. Now, they try crossing. What's interesting is when they decide to cross. They honestly probably should have popped their ultimate to cross so they didn't take as much damage. But it is okay. And you're going to see also the mistake here. You have 2 forward and you have 1 in the back, right? The one in the back is doing damage, but they're not capitalizing on that damage. As a group, essentially. There they go. I'm not sure where the Newcastle went. The lifeline somehow ended up in front. Let's take a look. How did that happen? The lifeline was in the back. Almost in the back. I guess the Newcastle needed to move up with them. Because when I switch POVs here, get ready, let's take a look. You either go together or you don't. Oh, okay, so the Newcastle's a 1. I misspoke. So the Newcastle got the damage. They need to clean this up. So I know you want to save the wall for the end, but at the same time, if this team doesn't get out, they're gonna be a problem later. So let's see how the Newcastle's actually. Let's take a look. Yeah, the Newcastle's actually backing up. Do you see that? The Newcastle actually backed up rather than moving forward, which is also a few seconds. Let's take a look. Let's look at that again. Ready? Look at their icon. They back out. There's a miscommunication there, and you can tell the ping. Warning, guys, careful zone, fear, warning. There's a miscommunication on what should happen. And because there's a knock, and unfortunately, I guess they never found a second Mozambique, the Newcastle got caught up by themselves over there. That's really unfortunate. That's why I say go together, live together. If the Newcastle just moved forward, and I get the Newcastle trying to call them back at the end of the day, you saw the ping. It became very clear what happened here. The Newcastle's like, guys, we need to hold here. And they moved forward, even though they did damage, and there was a huge discrepancy on where to play. And that was the ultimate mistake, because then this other team ended up mopping them up. And then we end up with pretty much a duo and a duo at the end here. And it doesn't really plan out that well, unfortunately. They do get a knock. That is good, but now they're split again. We got one going right and we got one going left. Now that can work in terms of, you know, I guess moving forward. Let's take a look how it does work out. Yeah, it's just split. Could you imagine if they were together pushing this, but they're not? And there's a lot of hesitating from the lifeline, like, where do I go? What do I do? Why'd they back out? What's going on? And the other team did back out, which is interesting to see. I think they win this, even through the mistakes because of the reset, because the other teams end up fighting. Yeah, they end up fighting. They rule these guys out, and they shouldn't have. They didn't clean them up. And I guess one thing you don't realize is because everyone can reset and it's anyone's game at any point, this can happen. And they actually, yeah, it goes in their favor. That's actually insane. Despite the mistakes. You know how I said at the very beginning of the video that even though they're blatant mistakes, sometimes they can work out? That's just the unfortunate reality of a battle royale. But it's important to dissect the difference between we got a little bit lucky here and things kind of panned out versus what we were able to control. And even whenever I coach, I try to say, what were you in control of? And what could you have cleaned up better together to win? So you were in control of every situation, which is what I encourage when you step away from the spectating series. Look at your gameplay and ask yourself the question, what could have been done differently to ensure that it wasn't just luck? That you were playing together. Where are areas that you could have played better, that you weren't hesitating like you're seeing on screen, even with the lifeline, and not separate, playing your own game. And even though you may play your own game well, it's just such an important question. I mean, there could have been a push here. You know, there's a lot of those things that you could have done that make a pretty big difference. So if you enjoy the series, please leave a like. I hope this was very educational. Hopefully this is helpful as well to see why those little details make a massive difference. And if you enjoy, see you guys all in the next one.